Hello, welcome. We're talking turkey. Here we are talking about my favorite country to visit. So, Turkey, Istanbul. Oh, it's such a glorious land. And I'm here to tell you all about why I love traveling to this country and why I think you should also love traveling to this country. Now, of course, I may be a bit biased, but hopefully I will win you over as I go along to this presentation. So, I am Brooke, if you don't know me, and I am representing my travel agency, my travel advising business that I call I'm Out of Here Travel. More on that in a bit. So, just a little bit more about me. I love Turkey. I book travel for anywhere, but I love Turkey. And so that is my specialty. That's what I know really well. That's what I love. And I say it stole my heart on the first visit, which is absolutely true. In fact, by the time we were on our second visit to Turkey, we decided, hey, let's figure out how we can stay here maybe a little bit longer than the what's allowed from Americans. So we learned about the Citizenship by Investment program, and we went through that. And now my husband and I both have second passports in Turkey. So we're American and not by ethnicity, but by paper. We're on paper, we're Turkish. We have two properties there. One's in Istanbul, one's a little bit down the coast in the city of Izmir. So as I mentioned on the previous page, I own a company called I'm Out of Here Travel. Travel advising is what I do, and that is providing consultation, providing advice, providing itinerary planning of any sort, whatever it is you need. My goal is to get you your best trip that suits your likes and needs the best. So that's what I'm here for. Why would anyone want to go to Turkey? Before I move on too much, you see the spelling of the country, right? It's Türkiye, which is how they originally spelled it in the Turkish language. But in the West, we've just called it Turkey, like the bird. Now, back 2 years ago, the country and the UN decided, hey, let's get away from that because don't want to be associated with a bird. In fact, in the US, if you're American, you may have heard a lot of people say, you turkey, as an insult to someone. So just wanted to get away from that when possible. So the official name of the country is Turkiye. A lot of people still call it Turkey, but just so you know, they are that is the official name to use going forward. You see over here in the image, there's a nice tray of Turkish teas. Turkish teas, if you're unfamiliar with this nice little tulip-shaped glass, they serve fairly small servings of tea, but you can get this at a relatively inexpensive price at so many cafes. In fact, well, I don't have those cute little cups at my house, but I have a Turkish tea bag and some hot water here. So just to celebrate our talking about Turkey, I wanted to have my Turkish tea here with me. So anyway, why would anyone want to go to Turkey? Well, first of all, it's beautiful. It's got a lot of diversity. So I'm going down to my third point already. Turkey has a lot of diversity. It has urban, it has not so urban, it has very quiet, it has coastal, it has beaches, it has beach resorts, it has mountains, it has mountain resorts, it has hiking. You get the point. There's a lot of different things in this country. It's a bigger country than most people think. So lots of history there too. The country of Turkey was only founded 102 years ago. So as a country itself, it's fairly new, but it has a lot of Roman and Ottoman history that goes on prior to that too. In fact, there are a lot of Roman ruins in Turkey. And so if you think that, oh, I have to go to Italy or Greece for Roman ruins and those are the only two countries, nope, there are a bunch there too. And I'll show you some in a little bit. So hospitality is fantastic. I find a lot of times in this part of the world that people are always happy and sometimes over eager to help. And so I like that. I just like feeling respected like that. And in turn, I respect the staff members too. So last point, did I mention the food? Aside from the tea that I have here, most of you have probably heard of some Turkish foods. You may not have tried Turkish foods, but when you hear about Turkish foods, you probably think kebab is the first thing. Now, you can get all sorts of different kebabs. I never knew there were so many different types of kebabs until I went to Turkey. There are kebabs with ground meat, there are kebabs with chunks of meat, and that goes for lamb, chicken, and beef. So all sorts of different combinations, different seasoning, different sauces. My goal at one point is and some point is to try all the kebabs I can get in Turkey. So there's kebabs. If you're someone who does not eat meat, no worries. There are lots of options there. They're also vegetarian and vegan that I also really, really like. Even though I'm an omnivore, I'll eat anything. But a lot of their vegetarian foods are also delicious. There are lots of things like tomato, eggplant, bell pepper basil, lots of nightshades if you're into those. And garlic and onion is everywhere. So lots of great food. And there are a couple great desserts too. I didn't get to that. I could talk forever about the food and the desserts. I got to move on so I can actually get going through what I want to talk about today. Just showing you on the map where the country is too, because not everyone might know where it is. It's at, like I say, it's a crossroads of Europe and Asia. So on this side of the map, on the left side here, you have Europe and a lot of the countries you know in Europe, right? We have Greece that's very close to Turkey. We have some that are farther away, like France and Germany, but those are still in Europe. On the other side here, this part of the map that I'm not showing, you have the Western Asian countries like Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, over this area over there. So just showing you, giving you kind of an idea where it is, more a zoom out. Then if you zoom in on this picture on the right, this gives you more of a sense of the entire country. So this peninsula here, it's a sideways peninsula. Istanbul, the biggest city in Turkey, but not the capital, the biggest city in Turkey, where I have this little flag that's kind of that aqua colored flag up there. So Istanbul, biggest city in Turkey in the northwest part of the country. It's a 16 million person urban area, lots of people in there. And because there are lots of people, there are lots of different personalities, lots of different communities with lots of different personalities. Other areas in this country, there's nice coastal areas that have places to stay and resorts and things like that. Izmir here is the third biggest city in the country. So there are other big cities in the country as well. Antalya, fifth biggest city in the country. I will say a little bit about Antalya later. Ankara is the capital. In this view of the map, I didn't get to show you all the major cities. There are other major cities as you continue east through the country. Like, for instance, it's not really a city, it's a smaller city, but there's a region kind of in the center of the country that's not labeled and not part of this shorter presentation called Cappadocia. And it's where you can grab a hot air balloon flight over those cool little rock structures, if you've seen that. If not, I'll talk about that in a future presentation. So yeah, influences from everywhere around it. And that's part of what makes it so interesting to me, because it pulls from so many different things. So in the rest of this presentation, what I would like to do is show you what I think is the best first-timers itinerary for this country. I'm saying it's 2 weeks. Now, if you have 2 weeks, awesome. If you have 3 weeks, even better. You can expand some of these stays that I have in this list. If you only have 1 week, no problem. We can shrink some of the times down, maybe take a couple places out. Sad though, that makes my heart. But you can't see everything, right? So it still can give you a taste of what's going on. So just to go along through the map here, Istanbul is probably where you would fly into the country because, like I said, major city, big international airport. I believe right now it may be the biggest airport in the world, if I'm not mistaken. It was for a while, but just as things go, there are a couple other cities that have been trying to build bigger, because these days it seems like everyone wants the biggest building and biggest airport. But anyway, Istanbul's airport is big. Let's just leave it at that. You can spend a lot of time in Istanbul. I'm going to tell you what you can do in Istanbul over the coming slides. After you leave Istanbul, I recommend going down to Ephesus. Ephesus, again, I'll show you each one of these going forward, is a major site of Roman ruins. So if you wanted to, you could drive from Istanbul to Ephesus. It takes about 5 hours, but if you have a shortage of time, I'd recommend you fly instead. Take about 45 minutes to an hour to fly from here to there. And then I recommend from here that you pick up a rental car Driving in Turkey is easy. I'll tell you more about that later. Pick up a rental car, drive over to the area here, Pamukkale, which is mostly natural wonders, a little bit of sports and athleticism there. So, major metropolis, Roman ruins, natural wonders in nature, and then driving down to Fethiye, which is also a little bit of natural wonders in nature, but it's coastal, so it's a totally different vibe. And then finishing your Turkey itinerary in the major city of Antalya over here, which also has some fantastic Roman ruins before heading back to Istanbul and heading back home. I'm going to take you through these sites one by one, just so you have an idea of why you might want to see each. First of all, Istanbul. Istanbul has a lot going for it. In fact, I have a second home there and I love spending time there. So Istanbul has a lot of mosques. Technically, the major religion in the country is Islam, is Muslim, but there are some people who practice and some people who don't, just like over here in the United States. There are some people who practice their religion and some people who just say, I'm religious, kind of. It's kind of similar over there. So you have many mosques that are the sites of prayer for the Islam culture, and most of the mosques are open and free for visitors to go in, except for during times of prayer. There are 5 times a day that that Muslims will go into their mosque or whatever the most convenient area is and pray. And that's when this is closed to the general public, just to make sure we show respect to those who are observing. But thing about mosques is most of them have such fantastic architecture that it's just a wonder to go in and look at these from the outside, from the inside. This one I have here is the Hagia Sophia, the first one I have listed. And so there are 2 different spellings of it, depending on what language you're based on here. But Hagia Sophia is a lot of, you can see golds and blacks and things like that on the inside. The other famous mosque that a lot of tourists visit is the Blue Mosque. And you can imagine the inside of that as well, blue. Well, that's got blue tiles on the inside. And those aren't the only 2. They're just somehow the most popular mosques to go and visit. There are lots of others that do have beautiful outsides and insides as well. And again, most of them are free to visit. You just have to observe that you don't go in during prayer times. And they're usually posted on the outside, so you know when that is. The Hagia Sophia keeps going back and forth between being a mosque and a museum. Right now, it's kind of mosque and museum together. And so it does charge for you to go in and visit. I just wanted to make you aware that this is one mosque that does charge an entrance fee. Other things to do, the waterfronts. There's water all around Istanbul on both sides. So Istanbul, I didn't say in the previous slide, but Istanbul is a city that straddles 2 continents. There's the western side of the city that is on the European continent on the European side. And then there's the eastern side, which is on the Asian continent, technically. Really, there's no difference between the 2. I know I've heard some tourists sometimes say, oh, you go to the Asian side and they serve you primarily Asian food. No, it's pretty much the same. You've got different neighborhoods with different personalities on each side. So it's a little just subtly different from that, but it's not, there aren't that many large differences. Major difference, I'd say, is on the European side. That's where most of the tourist sites are. A lot of tourists will stay on the European side of Istanbul. So that is the most major difference, but otherwise it's not all that different. But anyway, there's water, the Bosphorus Strait that runs between the 2 sides. It's a very busy waterway. You'll see all sorts of pleasure boats. You'll see ferries. You'll see cargo ships coming through. I think it's cool just to sit at the waterfront and watch all the boat traffic go by. Or if you want, you can get out on the strait too. You can hire a private boat. It's not cheap to do that, but you can hire a private boat for just you or in a small group. But the more affordable way to do this is to take the ferry system. The Istanbul ferries are part of the public transportation there. Some people literally commute from one side to the other. So I don't know. I thought it was funny initially to say, oh, someone lives on the Asian side and commutes to Europe each day. There are lots of people who do that there, and they will just hop on a ferry and just make their way over to wherever they need to go. Ferries are of different lengths. There are some that are 5 minutes long, a 5-minute long ride. There are some that are more 20-minute long ride. It's just such a nice experience to be out there. And the good thing about this, cheapest cruise cruise in the world. As of right now, this changes sometimes, but as of right now, it costs about $1 per person per ferry ride. So that means that if you and your travel partner got on a ferry for a round trip, it would cost you $4 just for the two of you, and that's all. So there's lots of nice viewing areas from the ferries when you're on there. You can sit or stand by the outside edge, just watch everything. It's just great. That's one of my favorite things to do when I'm there because it's affordable and you can see so much. Marketplaces, there are lots of places to shop there. Now, shopping, I know some people say to me, oh, but Brooke, I'm not traveling to go shopping. Hear me out here. So there are some historic marketplaces that you may have heard of, the Grand Bazaar, the Spice Bazaar. Spice Bazaar is sometimes called the Spice Market. Those are interchangeable. And again, the architecture of these old buildings is wonderful to just go and walk through. And there's so much great photography to be had inside these too. So the Grand Bazaar is very large. You can get lost in there. It's very labyrinthine. So I always tell people, try to remember the path you came in so you know what path to come back out. But still, when I've done it, it's been super hard because it's just so big. You can find all sorts of things in the Grand Bazaar, lots of different clothes, jewelry, watches, shoes, just all sorts of things, usually non-food items. There are a couple cafes, but non-food items in the store. That's what you'll find at the Grand Bazaar. It's fun for a little bit of a walkthrough. The Spice Bazaar is a lot smaller. It's an L-shaped building, and I would say, if I could guess, it's about a quarter-mile walk from end to end, so it's not very long. But in the Spice Bazaar, as you might guess, they sell spices. I'm going to show you a picture a little bit later of one of the booths in the Spice Bazaar that has dried spices and loose leaf teas that you can package up and take home with you if you want. And other things that you can find at the Spice Bazaar. There are booths that'll sell Turkish delight and other types of local candies. They also stand out in the center and give you samples to try to lure you in. But if you want, you can just take a sample, no obligation to buy. Lots of nice Turkish lamps, Turkish glassware. Again, it's just so colorful and energetic and great photography options. Now, if you want to do traditional shopping, there's options for that too. I'll talk more about that later. So unique shopping, traditional shopping, like I was saying, either, both, whatever you want to do. There are international brands in Istanbul too. So if you want to just hit up the Apple, Nike, Tiffany's, things like that, no worries, they're also there. Or you can go more unique like the bazaars. So cafes are a big deal in Turkiye and actually a lot of that part of the world. There are lots of cafes with street front views. So you can just sit, have your coffee, have your tea, relax, watch the world go by. You'll see a lot of locals taking breaks in their day doing that. And one thing that I find different between the US and Turkiye in terms of cafes is, I don't know about you all, but sometimes when I'm in a cafe in the US, I feel like I, bring my drink in there. I need to sit down, just guzzle it down as quick as possible, and then get out of the way and get on with my day. Now, sometimes that's because the pressure's on me, but sometimes that's kind of how the vibe feels in the cafe. I don't know if I've ever been to a cafe in Istanbul that's given me that vibe. Of course, there are some days where you have to move on and do something else, but they would have been fine with me just sitting there and drinking my coffee or my tea and getting multiple coffee and tea and just sitting there and relaxing. So I just really appreciate that. Street food, I did mention a little bit of food earlier. Now, in terms of restaurants in Istanbul, you can be expensive if you want. You can be super fancy. There are if you want, there are a handful of places where you can get $50, $100 a plate food, just like you can here in the US. But there are also so many little holes in the wall that, for instance, my husband and I will go to some of these holes in the wall and get not only an entree each, but maybe a soup and salad to share. And it comes out under $20 for the two of us. So that can be had. Those are restaurants I was talking about. This point talks about street food. There are lots of carts along the streets, especially in the more touristy areas, selling delicious things like roasted corn. There's a bagel-like thing called a simit that you'll find that usually runs, again, exchange rate depending, between 20 and 50 cents. You can get one of these. Other things, street food, ice cream, Turkish ice cream. If any of you have ever seen the Turkish ice cream vendors like on a YouTube or something like that, where they're just playing around with you and turning the cone upside down. If you have not seen that, I recommend looking for it on YouTube. Anyway, lots of great street food to be had there too. Other things that are great to do in Istanbul, and Turkish breakfast can be had anywhere in the country, but Istanbul has many options. Other areas do as well. So Turkish breakfast it's just a vibe. It's just a lifestyle in Turkey. Not everyone has it all the time. From what I understand, for most Turks, they'll do it one day on the weekend because just like in the US, sometimes you say, oh, okay, on Sunday, I'll go to Sunday brunch because I can be more relaxed with my time, eat more slowly, talk with my friends. Whereas, on a weekday, sometimes it's just like pound something down the throat and get it done. And that's kind of the same thing in Turkey. They will take this maybe one day of a weekend and eat the special Turkish breakfast. Here I am enjoying the breakfast. I was at one of my favorite places on my birthday one year. So here we have, with any Turkish breakfast, you'll get a whole spread of a lot of small containers. So you get a good variety of food, but it's all sorts of little small containers, some containing local house-made jams. So they'll take local fruits and preserve them that way. So wide variety, but you could get things, for instance, like peach or strawberry or cherry or fig or things like that. And usually they'll give you like 2 or 3 that they specialize in at that restaurant. You have a plate of local cheeses. There are a couple oranges there too. So local cheeses, breads. This is just kind of a standard bread, which is still quite good. This is a very delicious house-made bread that they make as well. Local olives, usually a plate of tomatoes and cucumbers along with that too. You got to have your veggies after all. And like I was saying, each restaurant is a little bit different in terms of how they present the breakfast. Most of them will have some sort of egg dish or sausage dish to go along with it. Back here, this particular restaurant has hard-boiled eggs with a little bit of curry on them. So just what each restaurant does is a little bit different. Oh, and it includes unlimited Turkish tea as well. So you can drink as much tea as you want to accompany your breakfast. Like I said, this is something that's kind of the weekly special treat for people there. And in fact, it's so much food that for me, I consider it less than a weekly special treat. If I'm there for a month, I maybe do this once or twice because it is just so much. But it is such a fun thing to do that I recommend trying it at least once when you're there. Shopping, I was saying, so many people tell me, "Oh, I don't want to go shopping when I'm traveling," but depends on the type of shopping, right? There's so much local culture to be learned about, even if you're out shopping in a grocery store. So, just something to keep in mind. Here we have a picture of the spices at the spice market. You can see how vibrant the colors are. Down in the bottom, you have some loose leaf tea right there as well. So, anyway, you can see that there are lots of cultural experiences and great photography to be had too. So just traditional shopping, Grand Bazaar, Spice Market. There are other small markets too. So most neighborhoods will have their little flea market one day of each week. And again, that gives you a snapshot of the local culture also. So that's the local shopping. I also said that you can find any international brand that you pretty much want in the shopping areas. There are malls if you need to go to a mall for something as well. There are also small stores that can give you where you can get local souvenirs. I like getting like usable souvenirs, plates, glassware, things like that. I have a couple of small bowls that I got for about $1 each, and they were locally made. So just the shopping, don't dismiss the shopping. Cafes, also something that you should not be dismissing. So kind of overlapping with one of the things I said earlier, there are some cafes that like from 12 o'clock on, will serve more your drinks, your coffee, tea, things like that. But in the morning, they might have Turkish breakfast available as well. So lots of places like that, like lots of places in the world also serve dual purpose like that. But cafes, there are lots of coffee and tea options. If you're someone who likes espresso drinks, you can get lattes and cappuccinos as well. You can get a drip coffee. You can get the Turkish coffee, or if you're familiar with that. I recommend trying that at least once if you have not. And again, the cafes are so cozy and relaxing, lots of color, which is fantastic, and great midday break. You might meet a new friend. One of the things that I say here, because Turks are friendly, Turks are social. Um, in terms of English language, in the cities, a lot of the people, I would say under the age of 50 or 60, speak reasonably good English. So if you're going to a restaurant, you say, I want to be able to place an order in English, you'll probably do fine. Occasionally there's a person who struggles a little bit, but for the most part, you'll do fine. If you want to have an extensive, in-depth philosophical conversation, that's where things start to break down a little bit because they aren't fluent in English, but they usually do pretty well in English. But so many of them are friendly. And I found that a lot of the cafe staff, when they realize that I speak fluent English, wants to use me to help them practice. So that's always fun there. I try to use the staff at the cafes to practice my very, very basic Turkish. And they realize that my Turkish is very basic and they just want to switch to English. That's pretty common though. So anyway, cafes are a thing there. I recommend taking some time for that. Now we're going to move on to the next place in my little itinerary. We started in Istanbul up in that northwest corner, and then you either drove 5 hours, which again is totally great, but it can eat up a lot of time if you only have a short amount of time for your trip, or take a flight from Istanbul to Izmir, which is that third biggest city in the country. It's a 45-ish minute drive from Izmir to get to the Ephesus area, and that drive is very simple. Ephesus, if you are not familiar with that, it's one of the best preserved Roman cities in the whole world. There's lots to be seen there. Of course, there's an entry fee to get in, but once you're in, I mean, you could spend 4, 5, 6 hours in there just wandering around looking at what they've put back together. And I talk about that way because archaeologists are continuing to find more things in Ephesus to show off to the public. And it's just a great way to learn, or maybe I should say hypothesize, about how life was back in the day. It was built back in BC times, so this is a very, very old city, and it was inhabited by different cultural groups until about 1500, and then it was just abandoned. Why was it abandoned? No one really knows why. All we really know around that time is there were a lot of earthquakes, there were a couple other natural disasters, and maybe at that phase in history they just said, no, 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 we want nothing to do with this anymore. So they probably just abandoned it for that. But the archaeologists over the past 100 years have just had a field day with this, just exploring and putting things back together. It is definitely a sight to see. So this structure right here, you may have seen pictures of it before. You're probably used to seeing it from a different angle. This is one of the major sites, the Celsus Library, and it's just spectacular to see, photograph, and take pictures of. So I said you can fly into the Izmir airport. You can get a domestic flight from Istanbul to Izmir pretty simply. So Ephesus is the ancient town. It just has the ruins, and it's not where you stay. But Selçuk is a little town that's about 5 minutes down the street. Selçuk, while not huge, it has hotels and restaurants and everything you need to stay before you drive and explore Ephesus. So that is why I love that area. After that, you'll take your rental car and drive about 2 hours to the east to see this. Now, this is one of the natural wonders of the country. So Pamukkale is how you pronounce that. It means cotton castle in the Turkish language. And you can see it kind of looks like cotton that's been stuck to the side of a mountain. At sometimes a year, depending on when it is, some water may collect in these areas and form kind of bluish pools, which always looks very nice. So with this again is built onto the side of the hill. The actual town of Pamukkale is at the bottom. But there is an area up toward the top that's kind of roped off and chained off where they let us walk on these structures. You can't walk over the whole thing, but you can walk on a little bit of it. Now, just to let you know, they want you to take off shoes and socks before you walk on it, just to help preserve this structure. But it's just great to be able to walk along there. But just as a warning, it's made of calcium. It's made of calcium mineral, so it can be kind of rough on the feet. So just something to bear in mind if you're doing this. So calcium travertines, terrace thermal pools, it's just something that naturally happened, and it became a tourist attraction. So like I said, you have this Cotton Castle structure up on the hill. Behind that are the ruins of Hierapolis. So it's not as big as Ephesus. In fact, it's a lot smaller than Ephesus. But if you buy an entry ticket to see these travertines, the Pamukkale travertines, you can see the ruins for the same price on the entry ticket. Standing up at the top here, you can see down below into the city. And I say city, I'd call it more like a town, kind of like Selçuk. It has a couple of hotels, a couple of restaurants, plenty for a few days to stay there. Also, those who might be into more the sporty side of things, you can do things like hang gliding and paragliding up over this area, which I have not done, but I'm sure would give a fantastic view of the city and these structures. From there, my recommendation is to drive about 3 hours south to the coast to the city of Fethiye. Resort town, as I call it. There are lots of resort towns along the coast. It's just that I happen to like this one. It's got a lot of hotels, which are of various levels of inclusivity. Some of them are just a hotel. Some of them include various amenities just stacking up there. Some of them you can see are right on the water and have a great view. There are some wonderful marinas along there too. Just if you're into boats and just hanging out at marinas, this is a great place. There are cafes and a nice walkway all along the marina, so that's fun. I like going here just because I love being on the water, and also it's a great place to relax. It just has a very relaxing vibe. Seafood is great here. It's on the water. They have seafood. And another thing that a lot of people do, I did this when I went to Fethiye, day sailing trips. So there are dozens of companies, if not hundreds, probably more like dozens of companies that sell sailing trips to anyone who wants. And they go out for a full day, like maybe starting at 8, ending at 4, something like that, full day. It's a good sized boat and it'll stop at various islands. I think most of them stop at 5 islands where you have opportunities to explore or swim in the water around the island. So it's just very relaxing to do as well. Lots of people there. You can meet lots of interesting people. And then these sailing trips in the middle of the day on the boat, they'll prepare you lunch too. So that's nice. As I recall, I did this in 2019, so my knowledge is a little bit outdated on this. But as I recall, when we did this, it was about $35 per person for the day sailing and lunch included. So I consider that a pretty good deal for a wonderful day out on the water. Lastly, on my little itinerary here, if you can, drive the coast to the city of Antalya. So if you look at a map, there's a coastal route that goes down and around. It does take a little bit longer than just going straight across and not on the coast. So whatever you can do with the time that you have there would be my recommendation, but coast if you can. So Antalya has a lot of things going for it. It's the 5th biggest city in Turkey, which doesn't sound like much, but considering there are lots of big cities in Turkey, the 5th biggest city has about 1.5 million people. So that's still quite a big city, right? So this has a great old town, lots of fun architecture, lots of fun restaurants and cafes in the old town. And there are lots of ruins in this city and in this area. So within the city of Antalya, there are some Roman ruins, case in point, one in this picture here. Just within half an hour drive of the city, there are lots of other ruins. They're not going to be as big as Ephesus, but they probably cost less to get in. So that makes it a little easier. And you can just, if you're into Roman ruins, just stop by a bunch of those during the day and look around. Now, the thing about this one in the picture, this is called Hadrian's Gate. And it's a picture taken at a slightly different angle. You can see over on the upper right corner, that's actually sky and trees there. So this is the top of the arch of the gate. So imagine you're leaning back and looking slightly up at an angle. That's the perspective of this picture. So this gate has one of the major city streets on one side. You walk through the gate, and on the other side, there's the charming old town. So I guess funny to me as an American thing about this is smack dab in the middle of the commercial city. So again, one side, the non-Old Town side, is where one of the major city roads is. And it's got all of your major brands around there. It has T-Mobile stores, it has Starbucks and things like that. And then right in the middle of that is this ancient gate. So that's nice. There are a couple things like that in the various cities too, where you can get your Starbucks and also explore the ruins at the same time. There are lots of resorts around the Antalya area, usually not in the middle of the city. You have to go a little bit farther out, but if you want to stay at a nice resort, all-inclusive or a little bit lesser than that, you can find that there. And since it is the 1.5 million person city, it's great for one last round of shopping, because I did leave this in our itinerary as our last stop before you would go back to wherever you come from. So if you want to pick up a few things here in Antalya, you can. I know that I picked up some souvenirs there. This was my last stop on my first Turkish trip, so I picked up a few things before coming back here to the US. Easy flight back to Istanbul. So Istanbul, I was saying, is the hub where you'll probably come into from wherever you are, especially if you're coming from the States. It's easy to get from the States to Istanbul, but then you'd probably have to take a flight from Istanbul to Antalya or vice versa. So in this case, you'd be flying from Antalya to Istanbul back to where your home is. There aren't that many, or are there any? There may be no nonstops from Antalya to somewhere in the US. But if you're going from Antalya to somewhere else in Europe, like Antalya to Athens, you can find some flights there. But just saying that you probably have to make at least a little bit of a stop in Istanbul before going all the way back to your home area. So that's my itinerary. I try to find a lot of variety in this itinerary. There's some urban, there's some ruins, there's some center of the country, there's some natural wonders, there's some coast, there's some marina, there's some charming villas. And so before I finish this off, I want to tell you a little bit of the details about how to make Turkey accessible, because it is. People ask me, how easy is it to travel there? How hard is it to travel there? And I want to let you know that it is relatively easy. First thing I want to mention, because I did mention renting a car, driving is relatively easy in the country. I would say it's as easy as driving in the US. The roads are modern. The signage is really, really easy to read. You usually will have signs that, like so many places, they'll list the city name, go this direction, the other city name, go that direction. So as long as you know what your destination is, that's all good. The one thing that makes driving not so easy sometimes is traffic. So outside of the cities, the traffic is not that big a deal. You get to the cities, like Istanbul especially, Istanbul is full of traffic. So that just slows things down a little bit. And I would not recommend driving in the city of Istanbul if you can help it. It's like driving in downtown Manhattan, if you've ever been there, or if you've ever thought about doing that and said, well, heck no, I'm never going to do that. Similar reasons that it's just so slow to get around. So also along that line, if you are in a cab, if you take a taxi anywhere in Istanbul, they're subject to the same traffic that the rest of us are, right? So take travel times by car in the city of Istanbul with a big grain of salt, because something that looks like, oh, it only looks like it's a mile, may take you over an hour depending on traffic. So like I said, the only warning for driving is try not to drive in the cities, because you'll just get so frustrated about that. So that's why I was talking about renting a car once you're done with your Istanbul portion of the trip. Next point, talking about the currency that's used there. The currency is called the Turkish lira. Sometimes they just call it the lira. Sometimes they call it the TL. It depends on what time who you're talking to. So this has been a very dynamic exchange rate in the past couple of years. Currently, at least currently in June of 2025, I'll just toss that out there as a caveat, we are at about 39 lira to 1 USD. So that will hopefully give you a good idea to estimate pricing. So if you're looking at menus and, saying, wow, that Turkish coffee, that's 80 lira. That's really not that much. That's about $2. So don't worry about numbers. It just depends on the exchange rate, especially if you've traveled internationally before, you're probably familiar with things like that. So there's been a lot of inflation in this country recently. I do want to address that. And the inflation has affected the lives of some of the locals. As Americans, traveling there is still a pretty good deal. Now, it's not as good a deal as it was 7 or 8 years ago, because the prices in USD were so low there. But still, living or being there for a longer amount of time, even now, is still a pretty good deal for Americans if you know where to go. So in terms of dynamic exchange rate and inflation, I remember back in 2019 when I was there, it was about 5.5 lira to a dollar. Huge difference, right? 5.5 versus 39. And then it slowly crept up over time. Been there a bunch since then. And last year it was about Again, dynamic, about 30 to 33 lira per dollar was going back and forth a little bit. And it's crept up a little bit more since then, as you can see. It seems to have stabilized a lot this year, which is good for the Turkish economy, but just so you know what the exchange rate is. Domestic flights, easy and cheap to do. Turkish Airlines is the airline of the country. So most of the flights that are around the country will be through Turkish. They have a low-cost subsidiary called Pegasus. So if you see Turkish and Pegasus listed, they're pretty much the same thing. It's just one's the low cost. So it's easy to fly domestically. It's inexpensive to fly domestically. For instance, couple of years ago, we flew from Istanbul to that hot air balloon place in the middle of the country. It was a 2-hour flight. It cost about $100 round trip for each one of us, which I think is fairly affordable. Now, it doesn't matter how long the flight is, but there are some international locations, like for instance, flying to Athens over in Greece in the different country there. Uh, it's a shorter flight. It's only about 45 minutes, but you'll still pay about double the price for that. So again, the cost effectiveness is better when you're domestic, goes up a little bit when you're international, but sometimes you still have to fly internationally, right? All right, so there is that. English, like I was talking about, is fairly prevalent in cities. You'll rarely find someone who's just struggling with even the basics of English. So if you're worried about, oh, how do I get to my hotel? How do I eat in a restaurant? That's usually not a problem. And if you really, really get stuck not figuring out how to communicate with someone, Google Translate is fantastic with Turkish. You can always use that as a communication. Generally, I found that the Turks who do struggle with English a little more want to communicate, they want to help out. It's just that there's that barrier there. So even if you use Google Translate, sometimes it's just a sigh of relief that both sides have. Public transportation is easy to use. I was talking earlier about taking a taxi being subject to traffic. So there are multiple forms of public transportation. There are ferries I mentioned earlier. They also have trams and metros, which are great because they aren't subject to traffic. They have their own dedicated lane, their own little line that they can go along, which is great because it's fairly predictable how long it's going to take you to get from A to B. Now, there are buses there, and the buses do not have their own lane. They are subject to all the traffic as well. And I have no problem with taking any of the forms of public transportation. It's just that the buses you can't entirely predict when you're going to get somewhere because of the traffic. So in terms of getting around the city, I'd recommend to prioritize the ferries, the trams, and the metros because you'll have a more predictable time to get there. And the buses really I only use when there's no other option to get somewhere just because I don't want to sit around in traffic. However, one of the good things about the buses is they have windows. So even if you're stopped somewhere in traffic, hey, you can look around and sightsee even when you're on a bus. So that's one of the nice things about that. All right, so coming up to the end here, if you want to plan a trip to Turkey or Istanbul or really anywhere in the world, I have other places that I like to talk about in the world as well. Here's how we can work together if you so choose. No obligation to work together, but here's how you can. So the first option is just a basic, more economical option. So for instance, if someone came to me and said, I know what my itinerary is going to be. I know what days I want to spend where, but they're asking me about hotels. What are the hotels they like the best? Or what hotels do I recommend and think are the best for them? And that's when I'll just take a little bit of time. It doesn't take that long and help people book hotels. But if you're on the other side of that and you say, I kind of know I want to go to Turkey, but I don't know where. Maybe we need to have a conversation about where that would be in Turkey that you want to go to, or any other side trips that you want to do. You don't really have anything planned out. That is the option too. I tell you, I can plan your itinerary door to door, and I literally mean door to door from your front door of your house back to the front door of your house. So for instance, I can help you out with transportation to your home airport from your house as well. So literally door to door if you want everything totally planned. For anyone, anytime, any trip, I'll always give you the first 30 minutes of consultation absolutely free just to get you going and help you out that way. And when I'm just doing the option one, the basic hotel bookings, oftentimes that falls within the first 30 minutes of research. So that kind of pencils out anyway. So what I'm doing, if you're watching this presentation, if you have made it this far, thank you for that. I have a promotion code here. So code Istanbul to get an additional 30 minutes free consultation. So in other words, if you tell me this promo code, which is good indefinitely, I'll give you 60 minutes of free consultation instead of the usual 30 minutes. So that is how you can work with me, either going to Turkey or going somewhere else. I'm happy to help you out with anything, although obviously I'm biased to my favorite country here. So just to finish things up, I want to thank everyone for spending the time, taking the time, listening to everything I have to say about Turkey. Hopefully I've inspired you to want to travel to this fantastic country. I say here teşekkür, which really means thanks more than thank you in Turkish, but just wanted to teach you a Turkish word there. And now you know. Contact information at the bottom, my name, the name of my travel business, which I have a Facebook, I have an Instagram, I have a LinkedIn, I have a Pinterest channel as well. So you can check out anything that I have there. Follow me anywhere. If you want to get hold of me, here's my contact information there. I have a phone number that works internationally too. So if you have a situation where you're overseas and you say, oh, I remember Brooke gave this presentation, go ahead and reach out to me that way, and I'm happy to help you. And there is my email address. So once again, teşekkürler, and enjoy your day. And I hope you really liked hearing all about my favorite country. Thanks.